Do you feel frustrated trying to grow your franchise? Are you having trouble balancing your consumer and franchise development marketing? Do you wish there was an easier way? Imagine if you had a proven roadmap to take your franchise's marketing from costing you to making you money. That's why we've created the Franchise Growth Blueprint. We walk you through the exact same process that we use to run franchise marketing campaigns for our clients at scale that has resulted in triple-digit growth. This blueprint isn't for anyone. It's not for people just starting a franchise. It's not for franchises without long-term goals. This is for franchises that want to scale up their marketing in a predictable and profitable way using a proven roadmap. If you want to sell more franchises, keep your current franchisees happy, and learn from people who have already done it, go to franchisegrowthblueprint.com and sign up today. That's franchisegrowthblueprint.com. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Franchise Marketing Podcast. Today, I have Tom Britt, who is CEO and founder of Towne Post Network. Tom, welcome to the show.
Jordan, thank you so much.
No problem. It's great to have you on. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who haven't heard of you and your franchise, what exactly do you do?
Good question. Tom Britt with the Towne Post Network. We are a community magazine franchise. So we started the publication here in my backyard 17 years ago, doing a small community magazine for about 15,000 residents on Geist Reservoir here in Indiana. And the concept kind of took off. We were doing a website with the magazine. It was a monthly format, had the name of Geist at the top. So when people got in their mailboxes, they wanted to see what was happening local to them. And we just kind of started growing it from there. And now we've got 18 different magazines in 2 different states, in Indiana and Kentucky. We are looking to expand, obviously. And we're looking for people who maybe have a bend for positive news in our community. They're tired of hearing about shootings, or maybe they have a newspaper background and it really kind of wore them out. People that really want to give back to their community, help the local businesses, but also are good networkers and good salespeople. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Awesome. So what made you decide to go down this wacky road of franchising?
Well, I stayed away from it for a long time. I wasn't scared of it. I just didn't know much about it. And franchising had always in my background had kind of a negative connotation. The franchise restaurants, which used to be 90% of the business model. So I just never really thought of it that way. And what happened was in probably at 2004, 2005, as I was getting our Towne Post network kind of going, I had a background in publishing, and the systems we built out to help myself, but also future people. We started thinking that maybe that platform we're using, this cloud-based platform that we had developed, could be replicated and maybe licensable to other people. And so we started licensing what we were doing and actually letting people use our platform. We provide all the infrastructure, like the billing. We handle all the printing and design and editing of all the stories. And we thought if we could just create that platform that people would want to use and could plug into, that would be a scalable business model. Well, licensing, as you know, is very similar to franchising. We had a management fee, which is basically a royalty. We had production fees. We handled marketing for them. So we were kind of acting like a franchise. And what happened was we did a story, coincidentally, about an attorney here in Indiana that was specializing in franchising. And I read the article, watched the video we did, and I thought maybe I should talk to this guy about what we're doing in our licensing model. And when I talked to him about what we're doing, he said, you really should just convert it to a franchise. And so we started the process of turning it into a franchise. Now, you would think we're already a licensed model. We already had people in our network. We already had the systems built. You would think that would be an easy process, but actually it was kind of difficult. The hardest thing we did was writing the operator's manual. It took me 3 years to write the operator's manual, not because we didn't know what we were doing, because as you start writing the manual and trying to explain to someone how you do things, you realize that that's probably not the easiest way to do it. And so we'd rewrite the thing and we'd find a new system and we'd kind of, revamp ways and systems that we had in place. So in 2016, we actually converted the license to a franchise. And that's when we started franchising. So it was kind of a long process, but it was kind of the gut check on, are we really doing this the most efficient way? And how can we support people and how can we scale if we don't have this thing just really humming along?
So, you mentioned the most difficult part was developing that operations manual. So, I want to hear more about that. Tell me, all of these nitty gritty details and your learnings behind it.
Well, as you know, whenever you create a franchise, you have to have an operator's manual, and it's in some cases it's filed in the state that you're filing in. In other cases, you just have to reference it, and you have to have that as part of your FDD. So the operator's manual has to be the cookbook on how you do what you do. And a lot of times in writing out processes and writing out how and why we do certain things, you start realizing that even though it's second nature to you, but it doesn't make sense when you write it out because there's gaps in it, or maybe we're using a system. And when you start trying to explain to somebody, you realize maybe this isn't easy. Maybe I should make it easier. And so it was just really difficult to take an objective look at something that you've created, because sometimes you're so close to it, you don't realize that there's problems with it. It's just second nature to you. And so that was kind of hard. And what a lot of companies do, and my franchise attorney, Josh Brown, recommended, was hiring a company to do it, because they would be impartial. They would look at it with new eyes and they would say, well, why are you doing it that way? Why don't you do it this way? But since I kind of birthed this thing, I kind of wanted to see it all the way through. And so it did take a little bit longer than I wanted to. But in the end, I think we ended up with a better platform, a better franchise system for it. And we're still tweaking it. The operator's manual is a digital file. We keep changing it. It's kind of like crypt. It's kind of like we have to keep changing it, because as social media changes, and Instagram a few years ago wasn't even our radar. Now it's like our top social priority. As these things happen, we have to continue to update and improve the operator's manual. I will say one thing though, we have an operator's manual for the really the black and white billing of things and how we enter orders and all those kinds of things. But we also have a training portal, which we started about a year ago, and it's more, I would say, real-time training. So it's the things that we can augment the operator's manual with that maybe it's going to change periodically. An example of that would be, we did a Instagram University. Again, became a higher priority last year. And so with that Instagram training, we did, you get certified as an Instagram publisher. So basically they go through about an hour and a half of training. They take a test, they pass the test, they get certified. And that real time, that kind of quick hit kind of training is always going to be part of our online digital training. While the operator's manual, which is more like the cookbook that has all the standard recipes in it, that will probably not change too much over the next couple of years.
I love this kind of hybrid approach that you're taking to things that stay relatively consistent, and then things that change, as you mentioned, almost in that real time. So are there times where you flag, trainings or information within your learning system and port it over to your operator's manual? And if so, what is that criteria that you use?
Good question. So yes, there are times we take a training module from online, a digital training product, and actually incorporate that back into our operator's manual. We try to update the operator's manual about once a year. When we refile the FDD is a good time to kind of go through that and just make sure nothing's changed. The numbers are kind of the same. Nothing big has really changed. The digital stuff are things that we can address, like an issue. Like, for example, we have a process where we sell stories. So typically in a publishing company, you have the editorial team, you got the sales team, and they usually are on different floors or they have a partition between them. In this case, you kind of have to break down that wall because you've got somebody selling a story. And so we had a process that we explained to people when they came through training. It's actually spelled out in the operator's manual on how to do it. But as people evolve and they get into their daily routines, they start creating their own workarounds or their own systems, as we all know. And so we came up with, and actually we're just rolling it out here this week. It's basically a 5 minute, here's what, here's a lot of problems we're having with this one little system, and here's what you're doing wrong, and here's the right way to do it. And oh, by the way, take this 5-question test to make sure you understand that this is the correct way to do it. So these little refresher things will never make it into the operator's manual. But if it comes out to be more like a curriculum, more of something that we don't anticipate really changing that much, that would be something we'd incorporate back into the operator's manual on an annual basis when we do that FTD update.
I like that. I like that kind of very like systemized approach to determining what goes in, what goes out, all of that. So Tom, I'm really interested because your end product that your franchisees offer and that you offer has both an online and offline component. And I'm sure, as you've seen, we have been moving into a more and more digital world. So I'd love to hear about the impact that you've been seeing, the learnings that you've experienced on that side. We'll get right back to the show, but do you feel frustrated trying to grow your franchise? Are you having trouble balancing your consumer and franchise development marketing? Do you wish there was an easier way? Imagine if you had a roadmap to take your franchise's marketing from costing you to making you money. That's why we've created the Franchise Growth Blueprint. To find out more, visit franchisegrowthblueprint.com. That's franchisegrowthblueprint.com. Now back to today's episode.
Well, the offline world. So let's talk about print, for example. That marketplace has really shrunk. Local newspapers, as we know, have kind of retreated or just gone out of business, or they've just really left kind of these little news deserts, as Google likes to call it, around the country. We're not really trying to fill that void. We're not trying to be a news source. We're only positive in our communities. We want to talk about positive things like new businesses opening up, a business celebrating an anniversary, maybe an all-star student at a school or something like that. So we try to stay out of the headline news kind of stuff, the clickbait stuff. We're staying away from that. So that business with us has really, we're getting more readership because there's less stuff in the mailbox, but it's also helped us help further define what our content strategy is, because we don't want to be just another local magazine. We don't want to just talk about nonprofits and events and all that stuff. We try to cater it more to the community that we're in. So that really hasn't changed a lot. What really has changed dramatically is the digital footprint, the importance of digital, and how we're delivering the content that we create. I tell people that, we have to be relevant 30 days a month, not just the day we show up in a mailbox. So how do you do that? You do that through social, you do it through digital, you do it through your Facebook, your Twitter feeds, your Instagram feeds. And so that's the piece we're really putting a lot of gas behind right now, is increasing that digital channel, increasing our traffic. We just had an SEO workshop for our folks internally last Friday. We've got a guy up to been on retainer for about 6 months with us, but he's now training our people on how to read Google Analytics and how to turn knobs to affect outcomes that we want. The one thing that we made a huge, significant investment in earlier this year that's really starting to pay off is our new directory. It's a townpost.com is now just a local business directory. And so it's real similar to Yelp, if you're familiar with Yelp.com, but I look at it as Yelp with a monthly magazine to go out with it to help drive people back online. And so that digital presence and the digital focus that we have, that is really the opportunity for us and just our whole franchise system in the future. As you read stories in the Wall Street Journal, or you read any kind of forecasting for the U.S. economy, but I'm sure in Canada as well, where they're showing a 15% increase in digital advertising this year, and last year was a banner year for them. So I think that really is kind of the territory that we see as a great opportunity. And then how you fuse that, how you integrate digital with your print and make them sing together in a local market. And you think about this from a local business perspective. You own a barber shop, or you've got a bakery or something on a corner. They're really trying to hone in on that 3 miles from their front door. And typically, Google ads, even Facebook ads aren't that daunting, but they're just so broad. It's just hard to see if it really worked. And then they look at direct mail, and they've got guys knocking on their door, mailing 10,000 homes around them with coupon mailers or Val packs, money mailers, those kinds of things. And what we want to become is kind of that one local trusted source that can give them basically print, digital, and social that's all working together, that's trackable. And that's what we've developed. That's what we're expanding on. And that's kind of the franchise system that we're selling to people when they come in, is the know-how that, yes, we're going to keep up with this. We're not going to keep up with it. We're going to stay ahead of it. And we're going to chart and define a new niche for community magazines that's never been developed before. And so that's why it's so important to have your print, digital, and social all working together. And I feel like we do it better than anybody. We just got to get out and start telling our story better.
Totally. And whether you realize this or not, but you brought up something really important, right? Like there's a saying in the world of digital marketing that content is king, but the reality of it is, the queen is really distribution of that content. So I'm so glad you brought up the three sources, like your digital, social, and offline, because they all work together to make sure that your message is actually being distributed throughout all touch points where your readers actually are.
Yeah, and it's funny because I another analogy I use, I always tell people that the magazine industry is like Jurassic Park. Um, Historically, magazines and newspapers, I'll throw them in the mix, and even just any kind of print publication niche have really had their head in the sand for a long time. And I look at digital, and I look at social, and I look at all these other platforms. It's great opportunities for us to expand our distribution. And I think they've looked at them as encroaching on them. Like, if I can't sell you a print ad if you're buying more Facebook ads, and somehow it's eating away from what we're trying to do. And people in our industry have to realize that the climate has changed, and you have to keep up with that. And if you can offer all three that work in a very synergistic way, creates a lot of opportunity for you. But if you just choose to keep doubling down on print every year and just hoping it works out, it's probably not going to work out here in the not too distant future for you.
Totally. So switching gears, Tom, one question I always like to ask guests is, what advice would you give someone just starting out as a franchisor?
My advice is to take it slow. It took me 14 years to become a franchise. And I say 14 years. That's from when I started till the time we started franchising was 14 years. And during that process, I spent 14 years constantly analyzing our systems, constantly analyzing, is it scalable or not? Constantly looking at people that we brought into the franchise model. Are these the right kinds of people? Are we attracting the right kinds of franchisees? And if not, which was the case early on, why not? And how do we, that quest to become a huge franchise and hit that march to 100 franchisees, that march has to come when it's ready, when the franchise is ready. And I think too many times I've seen franchisors just jump the gun, throw a bunch of money, get the right people, get a bunch of resumes, look good in the FTD, and just start selling franchises. And they quickly run into a lot of problems that is hard to remedy after you've had your 100th franchisee signed on. It's really hard to turn a ship once you've got 100 franchisees all kind of doing their own thing. What we try to do is we just spend a lot of time developing the systems, not worrying about the timeline, not worrying about how much money we're going to make at it, and just constantly reinvesting back in our franchise system to make sure that when we were ready to franchise, that I felt comfortable that I could bring a Jordan in and with some predictable analysis make you successful. And the franchise fee is great, right? But at the end of the day, I don't make money on franchise fees. I make money on the royalties. And if you can't be profitable, if you're not making money, and I can't support you, and I can't keep you on the bleeding edge of this community magazine niche that we're creating, then it's not going to be a successful franchise for you or for us. But I think that's the biggest takeaway I would give any franchisor. Spend your time on the operator's manual, spend your time on the processes, and make sure you've got something that's as bulletproof as you can make it before you start selling franchises. Because once you get them on board and you get these franchisees in, it gets it gets a lot more difficult to make changes and to make corrections on things that could have been done before they became a franchise.
Mhm. That's great advice, because you hear time and time again about the golden child franchise that just grew from like 0 to 100 units in like less than 3 years, and like you know and as yourself, it's like, oh, like, why can't I be there? What am I doing wrong?
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is, you're not seeing all of the work that they put in years before that.
Right. And I think that gets overlooked a lot. I think people look at, fastest growing and the hottest new franchises and all this. And, it's, and for some niches that may be great. If you're doing, pet sitting services, or you got a doggy daycare, and health and fitness was a hot market there up until COVID hit. But for us, I like to look at us as like a business that just happens to be using the franchise model to grow. The nice thing about being a franchisor and franchisees is you have people who are vested in their job. So this isn't like an employment opportunity. I think in our business, the magazine industry, and especially the niche magazine business, which there's a lot of regional magazine publishers out there, everybody's always been 1099. Everybody has worked for somebody. It was a family-owned business. They had 9 or 10, 12, 15 titles. But the franchise model, in my opinion, gives us the opportunity to do that on a much bigger scale and just support them and provide um, ongoing training. One of the things that we're pushing, or we're starting to push now, as far as like a growth strategy for our franchise, is we are looking for people who have a magazine. Maybe it's a family owned. Maybe they started it 10, 20 years ago, but they're starting to realize there's really no exit strategy for them. It's really hard to retire from a magazine you started. And I can tell you that personally, because that's where I was 17 years ago. But what we can do is we can actually onboard them and turn and convert their mom and pop magazine company into a Towne Post franchise. And then we'll franchise it back to them. And now they have something that they can market when they're ready to retire, because we'll take care of training them. We'll make sure they're still staying on the cutting edge of things. We'll make sure the websites are updated. We'll make sure the business and the trains still run on time. And that gives them the opportunity to then segue out and sell the franchise or whatever they want to do as an exit strategy. So that's one of our, I guess, tangentially, it's one of our focuses here over the next couple of years, is to get more of those people onboarded into our network.
I love it. It's such a smart idea, because you already have somewhat of a consumer base. You already know that these people enjoy doing this, like running a
Mhm.
publication, and have experience. So love that growth strategy. So Tom, I could chat with you all day about this, but unfortunately, we only have a limited time.
Understand.
So I like to end all of my episodes with something that I call the lightning round. So it's a few fast-paced questions coming at you. Are
Sure.
you ready?
Yeah.
All right, first question. What is your favorite tool or app that you cannot live without?
MagHub, maghub.com. It's our billing, production, and everything platform, and they're based out of Michigan. But kudos to MagHub.
Awesome. Next question. What is your favorite book?
Right now, it's B 2.0. Great book about being an entrepreneur. It's been updated, and it's also just talks about growth and strategy about growth and getting the right people. And it's also a very timely book for me because of where we're at in our growth strategy. So, highly recommend B 2.0.
Awesome. I'll have to add that to my list. Next one, who is a franchise leader that you look up to?
Oh, good question. Um, it's funny because locally we don't have a whole lot of franchisors. As far as franchise leaders, there's been a lot of guys. I've been to a lot of IFA conferences and seen a lot of these guys speak. And I would say there's a handful of guys, the guys that do Orange Theory Fitness. They just knocked it out of the park. I think it's the fastest growing franchise system in 10-year history of any franchise. And they took a lot of risk and they grew really fast. But as of a year ago, when I went to the last IFA conference, they had not had one franchise close that they'd ever started. And to me, that's phenomenal. So I would just say hats off to the guys at Orange Theory Fitness.
Awesome. All right, Tom, last question, I promise.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you and your franchise?
So our website is townepost.com, TOWNEPOST.com. They can go there. There's a link to our franchising website. And that's really the best way to get a hold of us. There's on LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. Just look me up for Tom Britt in Indianapolis, Indiana. And if anybody has any questions or I have people after these podcasts, a lot of times they'll reach out, just want to call and, chew the fat for half an hour. Love to do that too. There's not a lot of peer groups here in Indianapolis for what we do. So a lot of times we have to kind of go beyond our state borders to find people that just like to talk shop. So I'm always open to that as well.
Awesome. Tom, thank you so much for coming on. I had an absolute blast, and I
Yeah.
know our listeners are going to really appreciate your insights.
Well, thanks for your time, Jordan. I appreciate it.
No problem. Bye for now. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Franchise Marketing Podcast. If you found this episode useful, share it with a friend and subscribe now so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. And until then, happy marketing.